After years of estrangement, my sister claimed she deserved my wealth because I was always the lucky one, and then I'll be honest, I didn't think I'd ever have to deal with my sister, Emily, again. It's not like I hated her or anything. For years, I just told myself we'd grown apart. Life had taken us down different roads. But the truth? Emily always knew how to turn every situation into a battlefield, and I wasn't exactly itching to walk back into the crossfire. Growing up, Emily was the golden child. She could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. She was the one who got all the attention, the one everyone doted on. Meanwhile, I learned to work quietly in the background. If I got an A on a math test, it was expected. If Emily scraped by with a B-, it was cause for celebration. Back then, I didn't mind much. I just figured if I kept my head down and worked hard, life would even out. And it did for me, anyway. After high school, I got a scholarship to a state college, studied my ass off, and landed a solid job in tech right after graduation. A few promotions later, I was doing pretty well for myself. I wasn't driving a Ferrari or anything, but I'd bought a nice little house in the suburbs, met an incredible woman named Lauren, and had a wedding to plan. Life was good. Emily, on the other hand, took a different path. She married young, a guy named Derek, and had Noah by the time she was 22. The marriage didn't last. Derek took off when Noah was 2, leaving Emily to figure things out on her own. From what little I'd heard, she'd been working part-time jobs ever since, barely making ends meet. We hadn't spoken much over the years. It wasn't a dramatic fallout or anything. We just drifted apart. I'd call Mom and Dad once a week, but Emily was always in the background, busy with her own life. Until last week, when I got a call from my mom, Diane, asking if I could come home for dinner. "It's been so long since we've all been together," she said, her voice tinged with that mix of guilt and expectation only a mother can pull off. I wasn't thrilled about the idea, but Lauren thought it would be a good chance to reconnect. "Maybe things have changed," she said. "It could be nice." Spoiler alert, it wasn't nice. The moment I walked through the door, I could feel the tension. My parents were playing their usual roles. Mom bustling around the kitchen, Dad watching TV with a beer in hand. And Emily? She was sitting at the dining table, her arms crossed, staring at me like I'd just stolen her parking spot. "Look who finally decided to show up," she said, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "Good to see you too, Emily," I replied, forcing a smile. Dinner started out awkward but manageable. We made small talk, mostly Mom asking Lauren about the wedding plans while Dad chimed in with the occasional dad joke. Emily stayed quiet for the most part, only speaking up to complain about how hard it was to find a decent daycare for Noah. But then, halfway through dessert, she dropped the bomb. "You know, Caleb," she said, her voice deceptively casual, "you've always been the lucky one in this family." I froze mid-bite. "What's that supposed to mean?" Emily shrugged. "It's just, everything always works out for you, doesn't it? The scholarships, the nice job, the house. Meanwhile, some of us have to actually struggle." Lauren shot me a warning look, but it was too late. My patience was already wearing thin. "Luck had nothing to do with it, Emily. I worked hard for everything I have." "Oh, please," she snapped. "You think you're some kind of self-made man? Mom and Dad paid for everything growing up. You had all the same opportunities one did." "That's not fair," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I didn't have a kid at 22 or drop out of college. Those were your choices, not mine." The room went silent. For a moment, I thought that was the end of it. But then Emily leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "You know what's funny?" she said, her voice dangerously low. "Even now, you don't get it. You've been handed everything on a silver platter, and you're so wrapped up in your perfect little life that you can't even see how selfish you are." Before I could respond, Mom jumped in. "Emily, that's enough." "No, it's not enough," Emily snapped. "I'm tired of pretending everything's fine. Caleb doesn't give a damn about this family. When was the last time you helped Mom and Dad with anything, huh? Or checked in on me and Noah? All you care about is yourself." Lauren reached for my hand under the table, a silent reminder to stay calm. But I could feel the anger bubbling up inside me. I wanted to tell Emily exactly what I thought of her self-pitying nonsense. I wanted to remind her of all the times I tried to help, only for her to throw it back in my face. But instead, I stood up. "Thanks for dinner, Mom. We should get going." Emily scoffed. "Of course. Run away like you always do." I didn't bother responding. Lauren and I grabbed our coats and left without another word. That night, as we sat in silence on the drive home, I couldn't stop replaying the conversation in my head. Was I selfish? Had I really abandoned my family? Lauren must have sensed my thoughts because she reached over and gave my arm a reassuring squeeze. You're not selfish, Caleb. You've done everything you could for them. Don't let Emily make you feel guilty for living your life. I nodded, but her words didn't do much to quiet the doubt gnawing at me. Something told me this wasn't over, and I was right. I didn't hear from Emily after that disaster of a dinner. Not that I expected to, but the silence still felt strange. Normally, when Emily got worked up, I'd hear something from Mom or Dad within a day or two, either asking me to apologize or to understand where your sister's coming from. This time, radio silence. For a while, I convinced myself that maybe she'd finally let it go. But then, 3 days later, Lauren's phone buzzed while we were having dinner, and she frowned at the screen. It's Emily, she said, holding up her phone. I raised an eyebrow. Emily texted you? Why? Lauren shrugged, biting her lip. She sent a whole paragraph. I could feel my stomach tightening as I watched Lauren scroll through the message. She didn't say anything at first, but the look on her face said enough. What does it say? I asked, trying to sound casual. Lauren hesitated. She thinks you're being unfair. She says you've always acted like you're better than her and that you've been ignoring your family for years. She said you only care about yourself and… Let me see, I said, reaching for her phone. Lauren sighed but handed it over. Sure enough, there it was, a long, angry text from Emily accusing me of being selfish, arrogant, and ungrateful. She claimed I'd abandoned our parents, never once offered to help her out with Noah, and now had the audacity to flaunt my success in front of everyone. She even threw in a little dig about how lucky Lauren was to have landed a guy like Caleb, because, apparently, I was some kind of prize she didn't deserve. She's unbelievable, I muttered, handing the phone back to Lauren. She's just trying to stir up trouble. Lauren nodded. I know, but, Caleb, this isn't just about you and Emily anymore. She's trying to pull me into it now, and I don't want to get caught in the middle. Don't worry, I said quickly. I'll handle it. The next day, I called my mom to try to make sense of everything. Hey, Mom, I said, doing my best to sound calm. Did Emily say anything to you after dinner the other night? Mom sighed, and I could tell she'd been waiting for this conversation. Oh, Caleb, she's just upset. You know how she gets. Upset about what? I asked, my patience already wearing thin. She's had a hard time lately, Mom said vaguely. Raising Noah on her own, struggling to keep up with bills. She's just overwhelmed. I think seeing how well you're doing brought up a lot of feelings for her. So what? That's my fault? No, of course not, Mom said quickly. But maybe if you reached out to her more, let her know you're there for her, it would help. She feels like you've distanced yourself from the family. I let out a bitter laugh. She feels like I've distanced myself? Mom, every time I try to help, she throws it back in my face. She doesn't want my help. She wants someone to blame for her problems. Mom was quiet for a moment. She's your sister, Caleb. Families should stick together. There it was, the same guilt trip I'd been hearing my entire life. I wanted to argue, to explain how exhausting it was to constantly be painted as the villain in Emily's story, but I knew it wouldn't matter. Mom had always been quick to defend Emily, no matter what. I've got to go, I said finally. I'll talk to you later. That evening, as I was finishing up some work in my home office, I got a notification on my phone. It was an email from Emily. The subject line read, "You owe me?" I stared at it for a moment, debating whether or not to even open it. Against my better judgment, I clicked. The email was long and, frankly, unhinged. Emily accused me of abandoning her and Noah when they needed me most. She claimed I'd had every opportunity handed to me while she'd been left to struggle, and now it was time for me to give back. You don't know what it's like to be a single mom, she wrote. You have no idea how hard it is to make ends meet when you're doing everything on your own. Meanwhile, you're living in that big house with Lauren, planning your dream wedding, and pretending like your family doesn't exist. You're lucky, Caleb. You've always been lucky. And now it's your turn to step up. At the end of the email, she dropped the real bombshell. She wanted money, specifically $50,000. I'm not asking for a handout, she wrote. I just need a little help to get back on my feet. Think of it as paying back the universe for all the luck you've had. Noah and I deserve better than this. I couldn't believe what I was reading. Emily hadn't asked for help. She was demanding it, like I owed her some kind of debt for the life choices she'd made. I showed the email to Lauren, who shook her head in disbelief. She's completely out of line, Caleb. You don't owe her anything. I know, I said, running a hand through my hair. But she's not going to stop. She's already dragging you into this. And now she's probably got Mom and Dad convinced I'm some kind of heartless monster. Maybe it's time to set some boundaries, Lauren said gently. I nodded, but deep down, I knew it wasn't going to be that simple. Emily didn't respect boundaries. If I ignored her demands, she'd find another way to make my life miserable. Sure enough, the next day, I got a call from Aunt Linda, one of the few people in our family I'd always been close to. Caleb, I just got off the phone with your mom, she said. She's worried about Emily. She mentioned something about you refusing to help her. I let out a frustrated sigh. Linda, you have no idea how much I've already done for Emily over the years. She doesn't want help. She wants someone to clean up her messes. I get it, Linda said. But your mom's convinced that Emily's really struggling this time. She thinks you should step in. I rubbed my temples, feeling the familiar weight of guilt creeping in. This was exactly what Emily wanted, to turn the whole family against me until I caved. Linda, I said, my voice firm, I've worked hard for everything I have. I'm not just going to hand over 50 grand because Emily thinks she deserves it. I'll help Noah if I can, but I'm not giving her money to blow on God knows what. There was a pause on the other end of the line. I understand, Caleb, Linda said finally, but be careful. Emily's not above playing dirty to get what she wants. I thanked her and hung up, her warning echoing in my mind. By the end of the week, it became clear just how dirty Emily was willing to play. By the end of the week, Emily had gone from frustrating to downright vindictive. At first, it was subtle, little comments she dropped to Mom and Dad about how I was too busy with my fancy life to care about the family. Then it escalated. On Thursday, Lauren came home from running errands, pale and visibly upset. What's wrong? I asked, rushing over to her. She hesitated, then pulled out her phone. Emily called me. What? Why? Lauren handed me her phone and played a voicemail Emily had left. Her voice was sharp and bitter, dripping with fake concern. Hi, Lauren. It's Emily. Look, I just thought you should know some things about Caleb. I'm not trying to cause trouble or anything, but I feel like you deserve to know the truth before you go any further with the wedding. Caleb's always had this selfish streak. He's great at pretending to care, but when it comes down to it, he's only ever looking out for himself. Just be careful, okay? I'd hate to see you get hurt the way so many people in his life already have. Lauren paused the voicemail, her hands trembling. Caleb, what is this? Why would she say something like that? My stomach dropped. I couldn't believe Emily would stoop this low, trying to poison my relationship with Lauren just because she wasn't getting her way. She's just trying to mess with us, I said, struggling to keep my anger in check. She's mad because I won't give her money, so now she's trying to make me out to be the bad guy. Don't listen to her, Lauren. She's lying. I know she's lying, Lauren said quickly, but it's still upsetting. What if she starts telling other people this stuff? What if she goes to your parents? Or your friends? I didn't have an answer. I'd spent most of my life trying to avoid Emily's drama, but now she was dragging Lauren into it, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. That weekend, Mom invited us all over for another family dinner. I didn't want to go. After everything that had happened, I wasn't in the mood to play nice. But Lauren insisted it might be a chance to clear the air. When we arrived, Emily was already there, sitting on the couch with Noah while Mom fussed over them. Noah looked up and gave me a shy wave, and I smiled back, feeling a pang of guilt. None of this was his fault. Caleb, Lauren, you're here, Mom said, her voice overly cheerful. Dinner's almost ready. Why don't you all sit down and catch up? I glanced at Emily, who didn't even bother looking up from her phone. This was going to be a disaster. Things started off relatively calm, but it didn't last. As soon as the main course hit the table, Emily launched into one of her usual tirades about how hard it was being a single mom. Do you know how much daycare costs these days? She said, shaking her head. It's like they expect you to be a millionaire just to afford basic childcare. Mom made a sympathetic noise. That's terrible, honey. I don't know how you manage. Mom, Emily said dramatically. I'm barely holding it together. Meanwhile, some people have all the time and money in the world, but couldn't be bothered to help their own family. She didn't even try to hide the jab. Everyone turned to look at me, and I felt my jaw tighten. Emily, I said, trying to keep my tone neutral, I've helped you before. Remember when I paid your rent for 3 months after Derek left? Or when I gave you money for Noah's preschool tuition? Oh, please, Emily snapped. You threw a couple of crumbs my way and acted like you were some kind of hero. Meanwhile, you're sitting on all this money you don't even need while Noah and I are struggling to get by. That's enough, I said, my voice sharp. I'm not going to sit here and let you guilt trip me because you don't like how your life turned out. I've worked hard for everything I have, Emily. None of this was handed to me, no matter what you tell yourself. You're unbelievable, she said, her voice rising. You've always been like this, selfish, arrogant, completely out of touch. Do you even care about this family at all? Or are we just a nuisance to you now? Emily, Mom said, her voice panicked. Let's not do this at the table. No, let's, I said, standing up. If Emily wants to air everything out, then let's do it. Because I'm done letting her paint me as the bad guy. The tension in the room was suffocating. Lauren reached for my hand, but I pulled away, too angry to sit still. Do you have any idea how hard it's been for me to get where I am? I said, glaring at Emily. I didn't have anyone handing me money or bailing me out of bad decisions. I worked my ass off while you were too busy blaming everyone else for your problems to get your life together. Emily's face turned red. You think you're better than me, don't you? Admit it. You've always thought you were better than me. This isn't about who's better, Emily, I said. It's about you refusing to take responsibility for your own life. You've had plenty of chances to turn things around, but instead of doing the work, you just sit around feeling sorry for yourself and expecting everyone else to fix your problems. By now, Noah was crying, and Mom was trying to comfort him while Dad sat silently, staring at his plate like it might hold the answers to life's biggest questions. Emily stood up, grabbing her purse. I don't have to listen to this. Come on, Noah, we're leaving. She stormed out, slamming the door behind her. The room was quiet for a long moment after she left. Then Mom let out a shaky sigh. Caleb, she said, her voice heavy with disappointment. Was that really necessary? Are you kidding me? I said, throwing my hands up. She's been attacking me all week, spreading lies to Lauren, and trying to turn you against me. And I'm the bad guy for standing up for myself? She's struggling, Mom said weakly. She just needs a little help. No, Mom, I said, my voice firm. What she needs is to grow up and stop blaming everyone else for her problems. Mom didn't respond, and I knew there was no point in continuing the conversation. I looked at Lauren, who gave me a small, encouraging nod, and we left shortly after. On the way home, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end of it. Emily wasn't the type to let things go, and something told me she was just getting started. I was right. I wanted to believe that the confrontation at dinner was the worst of it, that Emily would take some time to cool off and eventually let it go. But I should have known better. When Emily felt slighted, she didn't just sulk, she retaliated. And this time, she was determined to hit me where it hurt. The first sign came a few days later when Lauren forwarded me a message from my mom. Caleb, can we talk? Your father and I have been discussing some things with Emily, and we feel like you're being a bit unfair. Please call me when you get a chance. I stared at the text, my stomach twisting into knots. Discussing some things with Emily was never a good sign. What now? Lauren asked, noticing the look on my face. Apparently, Emily's been working on Mom and Dad again, I said, setting my phone down. She's probably convinced them I'm the villain in all this. Lauren frowned. Are you going to call her? Not yet, I said. First, I want to figure out what she's telling them. The next day, I got my answer. Aunt Linda called me out of the blue, her voice low and serious. Caleb, I just heard something you need to know, she said. What is it? I asked, already bracing myself for bad news. Emily's been telling your parents that you don't deserve their inheritance, Linda said. She's pushing them to rewrite their will so she gets a bigger share. I blinked, stunned. You've got to be kidding me. I wish I was, Linda said. She's saying you don't need the money because you're already successful, and that it's only fair she gets more since she's struggling to raise Noah on her own. The audacity of it left me speechless. Emily had always been manipulative, but this was a new low. Not only was she trying to guilt me into giving her money, but now she was actively working to take something that wasn't hers to begin with. Have Mom and Dad actually agreed to this? I asked, my voice tight. Not yet, Linda said, but your mom seemed receptive. She's always had a soft spot for Emily, and Emily's playing that card hard right now. I clenched my fists, anger coursing through me. Thanks for letting me know, Linda. I'll handle it. But the truth was, I had no idea how to handle it. That weekend, I decided to confront my parents. I drove over to their house without calling ahead, determined to get some answers. When I walked in, they both looked surprised to see me. Caleb, Mom said, her voice overly cheerful. We weren't expecting you. I bet, I said, crossing my arms. We need to talk. Dad looked uncomfortable, but Mom's smile didn't falter. Of course. What's on your mind? I heard about the will, I said bluntly. Is it true that Emily's trying to convince you to give her a bigger share? Mom's smile faltered, and she glanced at Dad, who suddenly seemed very interested in the floor. Caleb, it's not what you think, Mom said finally. Emily's just in a difficult place right now. She's raising Noah on her own, and she needs the extra support. You've done so well for yourself. You don't need the money. My jaw dropped. So it's true. You're actually considering it. Mom sighed. We haven't made any decisions yet, but unbelievable, I said, cutting her off. Emily makes bad decisions her entire life, and now she thinks she's entitled to my share of the inheritance because I worked hard and she didn't? She's family, Caleb, Mom said, her tone pleading. She needs help, and we have to look out for each other. No, I said firmly. You don't get to guilt me into this, Mom. I'm done being the scapegoat for Emily's bad decisions. If you want to rewrite the will, go ahead, but don't expect me to just sit back and let it happen. Mom opened her mouth to respond, but before she could say anything, Emily walked into the room. Oh, look who's here, she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. What's the matter, Caleb? Afraid you're not going to get your big payday? I turned to face her, my anger boiling over. This isn't about the money, Emily. It's about you constantly trying to take what doesn't belong to you. You've been manipulating Mom and Dad your whole life, and now you're trying to guilt them into giving you more than your share. It's pathetic. Emily's face turned red, but she didn't back down. You have no idea what it's like to be in my shoes. I'm raising a child on my own, while you're off living your perfect little life. You don't need the money, Caleb. I do. That's not how this works, I said, my voice cold. You don't get to rewrite the rules because you made bad choices. If you're struggling, that's on you, not me. Stop it, both of you, Mom said, her voice shaking. This is tearing our family apart. Emily's struggling, Caleb. Can't you show a little compassion? I've shown plenty of compassion, I said, glaring at Emily. But enough is enough. I'm not going to let her walk all over me just because she's unhappy with her life. The argument ended with Emily storming out and slamming the door behind her. I left shortly after, my relationship with my parents hanging by a thread. But Emily wasn't done yet. 2 days later, I came home to find Lauren sitting on the couch, her face pale. She was holding her phone, and when she looked up at me, I knew something was seriously wrong. Emily posted about you on Facebook, she said quietly. What? I asked, my heart sinking. She handed me her phone, and I scrolled through Emily's post, my blood boiling as I read. Family should be about love and support, but unfortunately, not everyone sees it that way. Some people would rather hoard their wealth and leave their struggling relatives to fend for themselves. It's sad when your own brother cares more about his bank account than his nephew's future. Hashtag selfish, hashtag family drama, hashtag do better. The post had dozens of comments, most of them from extended family members who didn't know the full story. People were chiming in with things like, wow, that's awful, and he should be ashamed of himself. I can't believe this, I muttered, my hands shaking with anger. She's trying to publicly humiliate me now? Lauren put a hand on my arm. We need to respond. People are going to believe her if you stay quiet. No, I said, shaking my head. I'm not stooping to her level. If people want to believe her lies, that's on them. I'm done playing her games. But as much as I wanted to stay above it, the damage was already done. Emily had turned half the family against me, and my parents were teetering on the edge. I didn't know how much more I could take. After Emily's public attack on Facebook, things hit rock bottom. The comments kept piling up, with extended family members and even a few of Emily's friends chiming in to shame me for my supposed selfishness. It didn't matter that most of them didn't know the full story. Emily's carefully crafted narrative had done its job. For the next few days, I debated whether I should respond. Lauren was right. Staying quiet made me look guilty. But I also knew that once I started defending myself, it would spiral into an endless back and forth. That's what Emily wanted. To drag me into her mess, make herself the victim, and watch as I flailed under the weight of her lies. But then Aunt Linda called me again, and her words finally gave me clarity. "Caleb," she said, her voice calm but firm, "you're letting Emily control the narrative. If you keep staying silent, people are only going to hear her side of the story. You don't have to stoop to her level, but you do need to set the record straight." She was right. As much as I hated the idea of airing my personal life on social media, I couldn't let Emily keep twisting the truth. That night, I sat down with Lauren and crafted a response. I didn't want to lash out or get into petty arguments. I just wanted to tell my side of the story. The next morning, I posted it. Family drama is never easy to talk about, but I feel like I need to address some things that have been said about me recently. I love my family and would do anything to support them when they truly need it. But there's a difference between helping someone and enabling toxic behavior. Over the years, I've supported Emily financially on multiple occasions, paying for her rent, daycare, and other expenses when she needed it. I've also tried to offer emotional support, even when it wasn't always reciprocated. However, there comes a point where you have to set boundaries, especially when someone continues to demand more without taking responsibility for their own life. I've worked hard for everything I have. Nothing was handed to me, and I've faced my own challenges along the way. It's hurtful to be accused of being selfish when all I've ever done is try to balance helping my family with building a stable life for myself. To anyone who has questions or doubts, I encourage you to reach out to me directly. I'm happy to have an open and honest conversation, but I won't engage in public arguments or let this turn into a spectacle. I hope we can all move forward from this and focus on what truly matters, supporting each other in healthy, constructive ways. The post went live, and I turned off my notifications, refusing to obsess over the comments. Within hours, the phone call started. Aunt Linda called to tell me I'd done the right thing. A few cousins reached out to apologize, admitting they hadn't known the full story. Even some of the people who had originally sided with Emily seemed to backpedal, realizing there was more to the situation than she'd let on. But not everyone was on my side. The next day, Mom called, her voice full of worry. "Caleb, I saw your post," she said. "Do you really think Emily's toxic?" I sighed. "Mom, I'm not saying she's a bad person, but she is manipulative, and you've let her get away with it for years. She needs to take responsibility for her actions instead of blaming everyone else." "She's struggling," Mom said weakly. "We're all just trying to help her." "No, you're enabling her," I said, my voice firm. "And the more you give in to her demands, the worse it's going to get. You're not helping her, Mom. You're just making it easier for her to avoid facing reality." There was a long pause. Then Mom said, "I need some time to think about this." In the days that followed, things began to shift. Emily stayed quiet, which was unusual for her. I didn't know if she was regrouping or finally realizing that her games weren't working anymore, but either way, I was grateful for the silence. Then, one evening, I got a call from Dad. "Hey, Caleb," he said, his voice gruff but softer than usual. "Your mom and I had a long talk." "Yeah," I said cautiously. "We've decided not to change the will," he said. "It's staying split equally between you and Emily. And I think you're right about a lot of things. We've been too easy on her, and it's not fair to you." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. "Thanks, Dad. That means a lot." "I'm not saying it'll be easy," he added. "Your mom's still struggling with the idea, and Emily's not going to be happy. But we'll deal with it." The final confrontation with Emily came a week later. She showed up at my house unannounced, her face a mix of anger and desperation. "I saw your post," she said as soon as I opened the door. I crossed my arms. "And?" Her eyes filled with tears, and for a moment, I thought she might actually apologize. But instead, she said, "You've made me look like a terrible person. Do you even care about what this is doing to me and Noah?" "This isn't about Noah," I said, my voice steady. "It's about you refusing to take responsibility for your life. I've helped you so many times, Emily, but I can't keep cleaning up your messes, especially when you're not willing to change." "You don't understand how hard it is," she said, her voice cracking. "You're right," I said. "I don't. But I do know that blaming everyone else isn't going to fix anything. You need to take a long, hard look at yourself and figure out what kind of example you want to set for Noah." For the first time, Emily didn't have a snarky comeback. She just stood there, her shoulders slumping under the weight of her own choices. I don't know how to fix it, she admitted quietly. That's something only you can figure out, I said. In the weeks that followed, things slowly began to settle. Emily stayed out of the spotlight, and while our relationship was far from repaired, the drama finally seemed to die down. My parents were still adjusting to the idea of setting boundaries with Emily, but they were making an effort. And as for Lauren and me, we decided to move forward with our wedding plans, focusing on building the future we wanted, free from the chaos of the past. I realized that setting boundaries wasn't just about protecting myself, it was about giving everyone the chance to grow. Whether or not Emily chose to take that chance was up to her.